Well, to try to get a sense of what's happening on the ground, I spoke to Yuriy Sak, who's an advisor to the Ukrainian defence minister. We spoke before those referenda were announced, but as you'll hear, it was known that it was a possibility.
Almost all of the Kharkiv region has been liberated, and of course, liberating and regaining control over the territory is only the beginning of the stabilization measures. At the same time, the Russian forces, of course, they have not retreated entirely, and there are still severe battles in the certain areas of Donetsk region, around cities like Bakhmut, like Slavyansk. During the last 24 hours, the Russian occupiers have conducted 10 missile strike and 15 aviation bombardments. They have conducted around 60 artillery shelling on different objects in Ukraine, including civilian infrastructure. So the war continues, and as our president, Mr. Zelensky, said yesterday in his evening appeal, it is important for Ukraine, as well as for the international partners of Ukraine, not to lose tempo in this battle, because right now we need more military support to continue our counteroffensive, because nobody wants this war to become a frozen war.
Indeed. Do those battles that you're talking about overnight, do they reflect the fact that you have now had what you might call the easy gains?
These were not just easy gains. What happened in Kharkiv region, this actually exceeded even our own expectations. And, the further progress of the counteroffensive, it still continues, but it's not at this lightning speed as it was during the first week of September.
That's what I'm curious about, is what progress you're making lately, because we've heard about this village in Lugansk, which has been recaptured, or at least Ukrainian soldiers have been seen there. Are you finding that you are able to push the Russians out there too, or is that proving a harder job?
We have no other choice. And of course, as a result of this counteroffensive, the Russian forces are demoralized. They have severe personnel problems. The thing that we are now slightly worried about is the fact that Russians are trying to compensate the lack of personnel by turning to prisons. And actually, they're recruiting convicted murderers to come to the battlefield. And, we can only imagine, if their regular army is conducting war crimes and atrocities on such a scale, it is difficult to imagine what the convicted murderers will do when they arrive.
What about in the south, around Kherson? What news from the counteroffensive there?
The counteroffensive in Kherson continues at a lower pace because Kherson is largely and predominantly an agricultural region. So there are, for example, a lot of irrigation channels across the terrain of Kherson region. So from that perspective, it is more difficult militarily to advance because Russians are using these irrigation channels, as their fortification and defense lines.
The head of the Russian-installed administration in the Kherson region has talked about a referendum. It said that area will hold a referendum on joining Russia, and it's something that the Russian Dmitry Medvedev has called for more referendums in Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine. Are you trying to move to stop that happening because you fear that will give a legitimacy to Russia?
These fake referendums, of course, they will not be recognized from the international law point of view. It's probably just done out of desperation by the humiliated Russian army and Russian leadership to somehow compensate for the lack of the military progress. These fake referendums will not be recognized, and they're holding it a futile measure because we will liberate those territories anyway. We are seeing that local populations on every occupied territory by the aggressor, right, they are all in favor of returning to Ukraine, and this is why there is so much guerrilla movement. There is resistance inside those territories. So these referendums are doomed from the moment they've been announced.
Yuriy Sak speaking to me earlier. Well, James Water.